YouTube as
guy is very happy about our conversation
with
you.
Really enjoying us right now. The more we complain, the better the service we're going to get here.
Yeah,
So
that's how it usually works, right?
Yeah, you always complain to producers because that's the best way to make sure your show runs well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's working out really well for us. So if you see somebody throw a rock at us in the middle of this broadcast, you know what's going on over there.
I'd be impressed because that would mean that he had a rock in his backpack.
I could see Dan
being especially
the guy.
Reserved for this purpose.
I could see him having a rock. We're just saving it. Like one day, I'm going to use this rock.
It's called the talent rock, and
we'll see if he can ricochet and hit both of us at the same time.
Talent gets uppity, you throw the rock.
That's how you solve those problems. All right, I think we are live now, so maybe we should go ahead and do something. Hello. This is Close to the Metal. This is our weekly computing podcast. If you're tuning in live right now on Facebook and YouTube, thank you for joining us. This is the show that we do live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we talk about specific things that have to do with computing, and we want to hear your feedback, your comments, your questions if you're joining us. And today, we are talking specifically about AMD and their big announcements that they've just had about the Threadripper CPUs and the Vega GPUs, which have just come out, and we're going to kind of go over some of the details on them, and we want to know your thoughts because I mean, AMD has really been, they've been making a lot of waves over this last year, especially. By the way, I'm Greg Nibbler.
Matt Smith
here with Matt Smith. It's kind of been an interesting progression for AMD of where they've been going and how aggressive they've been trying to take on everybody from Intel to Nvidia. And again, we want to see your comments. So one of the questions that we put up was, will the new Vega and Threadripper chips make you go all in on AMD? Is this enough now? That have they made enough waves to make you actually think about switching away from Intel or Nvidia or whoever you're using? So let us know what you think about that and put your comments in there. But maybe we should start off with talking about the Threadripper. You think the Threadripper that just came out or that they just announced?
Yeah. Let's go with
which, by the way, Threadripper sounds like it's some kind of a move from Mortal Kombat or something.
Yeah, it does. I think that is the intent. And yeah, Threadripper is, of the two announcements, the one that's, I guess, a little less exciting, only in the sense that we knew more about it going in to the events that happened over the weekend. So we kind of we know the Threadripper's coming. We knew that it was going to be up to 16 cores and 32 threads.
Okay.
Which is sort of where the practical part of the name comes in,
right?
Because that's a lot of threads. That's way more threads than you normally see.
It.
Most people's computers probably have at most 8 threads,
right?
So, for those of you who might not know, a thread is basically something that can run logic on the CPU. So if you have say 32 threads, it means you have these 32 different operations
all
happening
going at
the same time. Yeah.
The more threads, the better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Generally
speaking.
Yeah.
So the Threadripper processor is a big deal because it has that really high core count and because it's coming in at a relatively affordable pricing. And I say relatively because the big one is $1,000.
Okay.
And there's going to be
the top end, and that's the that's the 1950X.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the one that has that 16 core, 32 threads that everyone's talking about. But there's going to be a lower end one with 8 cores, 16 threads. It's going to be $550.
$550 is not bad. I mean, how do you feel about that comparative as far as pricing for 16 core?
I think it's reasonably affordable.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I feel like it takes out a lot of that particular chip. This takes out a lot of the incentive to buy it, because AMD also already offers 8 cores and 16 threads on the high-end Ryzen chips.
So at that point, then just stick with the Ryzen instead of crossing over to Threadripper.
I don't know.
What would the advantage be?
It'll be interesting to see, once we get one of those in for testing at some point down the road, because the 1900X, which is the more affordable one, it's actually the one that's the furthest out from availability. I think it's August 31st is when the 1900 comes out, and the 1950 and 1920 are August 10th. Yeah. So you're going to have to wait a little while for that one. It'll be interesting to see how it pairs up with those Ryzen chips and see if like it actually is still faster. Like is there a performance benefit there from the Threadripper or not?
Yeah.
Because it is, it is a different chip than the Ryzen processor.
Right.
It's running on a different socket and a different motherboard.
Okay.
Right? So it's a much bigger chip and a bigger socket on a different motherboard than the Ryzen chips are. So I don't know. That'll be an interesting point to compare and contrast there.
And again, we haven't had any in to test yet. Right?
Not yet,
Because
no.
since these were just kind of announced. And
Yeah,
so if you're just joining, talking about the AMD Threadripper right now, the CPU that just came out. And I'm curious if anybody out there is excited if you're gonna buy it. Like, are you gonna buy the Threadripper once it's available? And what level, if so, which one would you buy? So will you, like, I know you'd still have to get it into tests, but ostensibly just on what you've seen, the statistics, would you buy one?
I think that the Threadripper processors are going to be really competitive for workstations.
Okay.
So yeah, like that many threads, that many cores, that many threads at these price points is definitely like really attractive.
Yeah.
Because if you're running something that can use like a whole bunch of threads, like some sort of software that does video encoding or something along those lines, there's a lot of research programs, CAD programs, all kinds of stuff like that. Just the more threads you can throw at them, the better, generally speaking. And to have this at $1,000 is just sort of nuts.
Yeah. To have it for that cheap.
Yeah.
Compared to
So
what, like,
I mean,
Intel
in
offers.
that respect, like it could be great. I think that if you're, if yours is a general home user, we're well past the point where this kind of thing is going to be of any benefit to you.
Yeah.
So
like
we really do have to talk about specialist applications here, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, like that's sort of been the case for a while.
Yeah. Will you actually utilize this at something of this level?
Yeah.
Something with that many cores.
Yeah, we've
like,
all
who would
known
be doing that?
for at least like the last 5, maybe even 10 years that, if you just do check your email and check your web, you just
you're
not
going
to be fine.
You don't need to spend $1,000 on a CPU.
So it's really those high-end tasks that are going to be benefiting from it.
Okay. So again, talking about the Threadripper CPUs from AMD, announced, I think over this weekend, Sunday is when they were announced. Not that we didn't know they were coming, but all the details as far as the release dates and everything that has to do with it. And I am curious, if you're watching, will you buy the Threadripper CPU, or do you even have a use for it? Or maybe if you are doing somebody who's, I would say like a lot of video encoding, like you said, or 3D rendering, something like that, you'd probably want it. So that's what we know about the Threadripper CPU. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in there. Maybe we should go on though to the Vega RX GPUs, because that's what we didn't really know a whole lot about going into it. Correct. So what do we know right now?
So Vega has had this like, it's been maybe the most teased video card ever. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's probably been another one that's been drawn out more. But we started hearing about Vega last year, like at least midway through the year, and the whole time fans of AMD were hoping that it was going to be right around the corner.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. And AMD wasn't really saying much about the release date. And now finally we do have specifications and release information about a card that's oriented at gamers.
Which this is kind of the first one from AMD that's going to be specifically targeting gamers.
Right. So earlier this year, a few months ago, they came out with the Vega Frontier Edition, but it was really more. It was oriented towards GPU computing.
Okay.
And I don't remember offhand what the price was for that, so I'm going to Google it here real quick.
Okay. I mean, it does seem...
It was about $1,500. It looks like it was a $1,500 MSRP. I'm actually seeing them for $1,000 here on Newegg, but even at that, like obviously that price point, like that is way beyond what you normally would pay for even a GTX 1080 Ti, which is kind of considered the high end of gaming cards. There are faster cards technically,
but that's like the industry standard.
But they're not the ones that are meant for gamers.
Yeah.
So with this latest announcement, Radeon Vega 64 and 56 are the two cards that were announced. Well, actually, I guess technically there were 4 cards announced.
Okay.
So
right.
bear with me here.
So let's go through them.
So the main ones were the Vega 64 and the 56.
Okay.
There's also a liquid cooled version.
Okay.
Of the 64.
All right.
Which is apparently only going to be available in a bundle deal.
Okay.
And in addition to this, there's going to be one called the Vega Nano.
Okay.
Which is going to be like half the size of the other ones.
Okay.
So it's going to be for small desktops.
So it's just physically.
But we don't know. Yeah, it's physically smaller, and we don't know anything too specific about that yet. Now, for the 64 and the 56, in the liquid-cooled 64, we have all the specifications.
Okay. So we know about these. So maybe should we go through each one of these?
Let's just hit like the major points.
Okay.
I think probably one of the major ones is the teraflops figure, which is always quoted as like, I don't know, is this a general benchmark figure for a video card? The fastest one, the liquid-cooled Vega 64, is 13.7 teraflops.
Okay.
So that is going to easily beat anything else that is out there targeted towards gamers. So
that's the Vega 64, again, 13.7 teraflops, it looks like, is what it is.
So to give you an idea of how fast it is, it would be about, I mean, it's approaching 3 times the quoted performance of a PlayStation 4 Pro.
Damn. Okay.
And
that's a good way to put it.
It's
in
over
perspective.
twice the quoted performance of an Xbox One X, which is the unreleased upcoming
so it's fast is what
console.
You're saying.
Yeah, it's very fast. And the GTX 1080 Ti Founders Edition, it was about 11 teraflops is what.
Okay.
11.3 is the number I'm seeing right now. So it's a little bit quicker than that as well, about 20%, I guess.
Yeah.
Just doing math that I've back
math
in my head, which I'm not really great at, but I think that's about 20%, maybe 15% increase.
Okay.
So that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, right. And price point, how does it compare?
Well, the thing about the liquid cooled edition that's a little tricky is it has that bundle issue. So the non-liquid cooled one is going to be $500.
Okay.
And it's going to be $499.
$499.
And the 56, the Vega 56, is going to be $400.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not a big price difference between the two. And again, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the AMD Vega RX GPUs that AMD just announced, and just kind of AMD in general and everything that they've done over the last year. Because, I mean, it seems like every week they have a new something coming out. There's a brand new GPU or CPU. I know it's not every week, but it does feel like that this year. It's such
that's also a little bit of like that hype they've had with Vega, because they have drawn this out for so long that that's what's been going on. Like, it feels like every week there's something about Vega, but the thing is, we're only now actually getting the cards that you're going to want to buy.
It is going to back up all that hype.
AMD's been very clever about that. They've been very good at drawing this out, but it is finally here, and it's coming August 14th, I believe, is street date, if I recall right. So,
which is a quick release date to finally actually announce it, and then boom, they've already got it out. Or is that pretty standard?
I don't know. It's fairly standard.
Okay.
Usually, if you're going to have an announcement like this, it's going to be out in a month.
Yeah.
And with release dates like this, the interesting thing to see is what when the date is actually hit, what the availability is. Mm-hmm. Because it's supposed to come out at a certain time doesn't mean you're going to really be able to buy one.
Right.
And I would say like that's probably going to be a problem with these cards for sure.
Actually getting your hands on them.
Yeah.
I mean, is this going to fall into that same issue? Not that we want to go too far into that, but with the whole shortage of GPUs. This will be.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a big issue.
Because if it's this powerful, all that cryptocurrency stuff, they're going to snag these ones.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pin-up demand for gamers. There's a lot of AMD fans out there who are going to want these cards. Because AMD hasn't really had a response to NVIDIA's GTX 1070 in particular, but also the 1080. Now, the GTX 1070 is, in the 970 before it, are kind of like the sort of gold standard video cards, I'd say.
Right.
They tend to be the most popular ones when you're looking at Steam stats.
They're attainable, too. They're not too expensive.
Yeah, they're not so expensive that they become extremely unattainable. They also hit a very nice price performance value, mark. So a lot of people like those cards.
Yeah.
And AMD hasn't really had anything to compete with that.
So is that what these are? Well, the 64 and 56
So
compete?
the Vega 56 would be sort of the GTX 1070 competitor.
Okay.
And at $400, it's definitely expensive. But if it comes in and it ends up being something that can play, pretty much anything at a 1440p resolution, some things at 4K, that's going to look like a really good value to a lot of people. It'll be a card that that should last you a while. So I think that's one that's going to be really popular with gamers, and we'll finally give AMD fans who wanted that higher end option, something to go for. Because the only thing you could really do before this is buy 2 RX 580s.
Yeah.
And that really isn't an ideal
situation. Why do that when you can just buy a 970 or 1070?
Yeah, I mean, like they work well together, those 2 RX 580s, but Crossfire has always been something that's kind of like, in some games, it just doesn't work very well. So,
and again, if you're tuning in, we're talking about the AMD Vega RX GPUs that they just announced, and whether or not they'll compete with the 970 and the 1070, and if you would buy them. Is this enough to where, are you an AMD fan, have been waiting for this, and now you're ready to jump in and buy the AMD Vega after all the hype, or is it still not enough for you to get into it? And maybe we should talk about that, some of the competition that they've got. You think, or is there more you want to discuss with the AMD Vega?
No, I think
what else should people know? Maybe
I think. Well, actually, one more thing. Let's get one more thing about Vega, and it's sort of riffing off the cryptocurrency thing, which is really, they have some bundle deals that are coming out. Okay, so Vega, people who want to buy a Vega video card can do so in these bundles that offer 2 games. It's Prey and Wolfenstein 2. And
is Wolfenstein 2 out?
I don't think it is out yet.
Yeah, I didn't think it was.
It's upcoming. But these aren't going to be released until a few weeks from now. So it's probably going to be out by then.
October 27th. That's when Wolfenstein 2.
Okay, well, in that case,
so maybe you get it ahead of time.
I've seen this before. You don't get it ahead of time. It's basically a voucher for when it does come out.
Gotcha.
I've seen that happen before.
Okay.
So anyway, you get those games. Also, what you get is a discount off a Samsung CF791 monitor, $200 discount, and $100 off a Ryzen 7 CPU and motherboard.
Okay.
Right?
So what's that total package cost?
The air-cooled Vega 64 package is $600.
Okay.
So if you were going to buy everything that I just mentioned, you would get a $300 discount off that. So you'd basically be getting the video card for $200 less than you would if you bought it alone.
Okay. I mean, that's not a bad.
And then the liquid cooled one, which, as I mentioned, this is the only way to get the liquid cooled one, is going to be $700.
Okay.
And that's what you're getting
when
you get that bundle. What you're getting when you get that bundle is actually, it's a little confusing, but what you're getting is you're getting the card and you're getting the 2 games. Those are the only things that you're actually getting, like, that are physical.
Okay.
You're also getting a discount for that monitor and a discount for the Ryzen processor motherboard. But those aren't like you don't have to get those.
Yeah.
You get that discount. You can buy them or not.
Okay.
Now, if you didn't, I don't know if it would make a lot of sense, because obviously you'd probably just be paying a lot for those games. But yeah, so you really want to use those discounts.
Yeah.
For the bundles.
Take advantage of it.
But you don't have to do it. Now, the reason why they're doing this, I think, aside from promoting their own hardware, because of course they would like you to buy a Ryzen processor too.
They want to try to get you in on all of that.
But aside from that, I think this also is sort of serving dual purposes, trying to make sure that gamers are getting more of these cards. Because, if you are a cryptocurrency miner and you have your eye on Vega, you probably would rather not buy one of these bundles.
Right, you don't need all of that.
Because you're either paying a little bit more for the card, and you don't need all that, right? So it would be this unnecessary stuff. That said, I'm not sure the bundles are actually expensive enough to dissuade a lot of miners. So we may see a lot of people go. We may see a lot of people go and buy these bundles and just immediately throw out the vouchers and just want the card.
Or you'll see a monitor on sale on.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah. Some people might do that. So
again, and if you don't know about that, we did a whole episode on Close to the Metal about how GPUs are being used by cryptocurrency miners and what that's doing to the price. If you're watching right now, you probably already understand that.
Long story short, it's making the prices go up a lot.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
Up to double. So, with something like this, if we see Vega get hit, by availability issues, it's very likely we'll see these cards end up going towards the $1,000 mark.
Dang! Right out of the
if that happens, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because these cards are probably going to be pretty popular with a wide variety of people. So
try to get it quick if you want one.
Yeah. I mean, if you want one, you might want to try and I always, we always want to encourage people, read the review.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe get a pre-order with a place that has a good return policy. If you think you're really going to want this card, it might be a good idea, because if you don't get it early, you probably are going to have to wait a little while.
And that's for the Vega 64 and the 56 will probably be.
Yeah, I imagine it'll be the same story for both.
And so the release date on that is August 14th for the AMD Vega 64 and 56 and the bundle packages and everything that we're discussing with that. There's a full review at digitaltrends.com as far as just the information that you need on when they're available and what's included. Let's talk about the competition, though, because AMD, they've really been trying to go after Intel and Nvidia. They're trying to make a name for themselves, and they have made a name for themselves, at least marketing-wise, over the last year. I mean, not that we didn't know who they were before, but they've really made a push at all of these other companies. And is it having an effect? Is it affecting Intel? Are they noticing? Are they doing anything in response to AMD's attack in their kind of area?
Well, let's talk about, since we're talking about Vega right now, let's talk about Nvidia first.
Okay.
And as far as what this is going to do with competition against Nvidia, I think first of all, it's a little hard to say before we actually get reviews of the cards.
Yeah.
Because I quoted, those teraflop figures, right? And how the high-end Vega, actually even the Vega 64 is quoting a number higher than the GTX 1080 Ti, which is Nvidia's best gaming targeted card.
That's impressive.
So on paper, that would look, you would think, wow, like if that's Vega 64 is $500, and a GTX 1080 Ti is usually selling around $700. That seems like would be a really, really good deal. However, in the past, we've seen that the way that AMD gets to its numbers tends to result in higher teraflops numbers than Nvidia does. And that isn't necessarily borne out in performance. If you look at that number of like an RX 580, which quotes around 6.1 or 6.2 teraflops, you'd think that's a lot faster than a GTX 1060, which, if I recall, quotes a little under 4 teraflops.
Okay.
But it's not really how it works out in reality. They tend to be about the same.
Okay.
In actual game performance. It depends on from game to game. Some are better optimized for one than the other. So I don't know. And also looking at the pricing, I would again expect these to be GTX 1070 and 1080 competitors, and not. I don't think these are going to take the crown away from the 1080 Ti for performance on that very top end, because it would just be kind of, AMD doesn't want to just give away money. So so if they came out with a card that beat the 1080 Ti and then priced it $200 less. Like, that would just be a little too good to be true.
Right. I hand away $200.
I mean, if it ends up being that way, then that card's going to get a very good review score. But I would doubt it, because they obviously
like you said,
could get
nobody
more
wants
for
to
that
hand
card.
away money,
especially right now with the video cards being so hard to get a hold of anyway.
Right. You might as well mark it up.
You really don't get a lot from just discounting it insanely. So that would be my expectation. I don't think Nvidia is going to have an immediate response to this.
Okay.
If it turns out that these cards are beating the 1070 and 1080 by a decent margin, then they could easily drop the price.
And just try to undercut them.
That would be the first, the first thing I would expect to see for Nvidia, and that's pretty typical. Both of these companies, if they get a competitor that comes out with a new card, new architecture, and it beats them by a bit, oftentimes a quick price drop.
Yeah.
Sort of puts them back in line. So, but on the whole, though, that actually makes this pretty good news for, I think, AMD fans. If you want to get the AMD video card in your high-end rig, it's probably not going to be an immediate thing that Nvidia is going to have a response that's going to beat the new Vega cards for sure. So that's good news for the Red team, I think.
Okay. And then what about on the Intel side?
Yeah, the Intel side is even more interesting because Intel has sort of been pushed to come out with this whole X series, which I think we might have talked about on earlier episodes a little bit.
Yeah.
But basically, so it's a little confusing how they have it divvied up, but basically they now have an X series, a Core X series.
Yeah.
And this,
we did talk about
this. This is added on to the Core i5 and i7 sort of nomenclature, right?
It's got an X.
Yeah. So now it goes up to Core i9. And by the end of the year, they're going to have 18-core, 36-thread processors. Is what they're
18
slated
core,
to have.
36 processors. Okay.
Yeah. And at
right
the moment,
now,
they have up to 10 cores, 20 threads. By the end of the month, I believe they should have 12 cores, 24 threads. So, they're pushing it up there closer and closer to what Threadripper has. And this is, again, a new line from Intel, and also a new Core i9. They never had that before. So, obviously, this is stuff that they haven't had to do before.
Yeah.
So they do feel a little threatened.
Yeah, they're taking notice of what
by what AMD is doing. They're taking notice. They're having a response. Their response is to come out with more processors, more cores, more threads.
Yeah.
Higher clock speeds, all the things you would expect. The thing is that being Intel processors, they do still look like they're pretty pricey.
Yeah.
So the processor that's going to be price competitive with the Threadripper, that's the 32 thread one, is going to be like a Core i9 7900X, and that's a 10-core 20 thread.
Okay.
So that's 6 less cores, 12 less threads.
Right. What was the price? What are they?
Looks like it's going to go for $990.
Okay. Yeah. See, at that point,
basically $1,000
for $1,000,
same price.
You can get the 1950X with
16.
And
AMD specifically called that out in sort of its press package, saying like the Threadripper is going to be up to 38% quicker in Cinebench.
Yeah.
Than this chip that's the same price from Intel. So it's going to be interesting to see how that competition shakes out over the coming 6 months.
Okay.
By the end of the year, basically, because that's when Intel should have its full line out of processors that are probably going to go up to around $2,000 on that high end. And so there's definitely going to be a lot of options if you want the Intel chip, but it also is going to be something where you might be looking at, you're going to be expecting to pay more.
Yeah.
For relatively similar performance, perhaps. Again, none of these have been reviewed, so
yeah,
it's kind of hard to say.
Talking about the AMD Threadripper, and yeah, they haven't been here in house yet, so no actual benchmarks to put it on, but it's still at the same point.
And we do have some of those Extreme Edition chips in house, and we are working on testing those. So should be seeing some stuff on that soon. Should
see the reviews all show up at digitaltrends.com. And we've got the basic write-ups on all of these, on everything that AMD's come out with as far as the Threadripper and the Vega RX GPUs. I do see Terry wrote on YouTube, AMD have made a great platform to enable consumers to finally be able to afford extreme high-end gaming and enable a lot of creative and gaming audience to reach better performance.
Yeah, and I think that is something that's nice about the AMD hardware right now is the platform on both the Ryzen and the Threadripper side. Okay. Now, they are different platforms. They're different sockets, so you can't throw Threadripper into a Ryzen rig. But otherwise, they're new motherboards, they're new sockets. So, and AMD is saying they're going to use these sockets for till 2020. Okay. On Ryzen at least, I'm not sure if they definitely sit on Threadripper, but it would kind of make sense for them to also use that socket for a while. And basically, what that means is if you buy and put together one of these systems right now, you should have upgrade options down the road where you can throw in a new processor and be able to upgrade your rig a bit, get rid of the old processor, maybe sell it on eBay or something. And
so they're really trying to get you in for a while.
Yeah, and that's something that with Intel's chips right now is not as appealing because they're on an older platform right now. Their Intel Core chips are on a platform that's on its second generation, so it'll probably it's Intel Core i5, i7 chips, like the i7 7700K. The platform that's on is probably going to be replaced for the next generation. That's likely what's going to happen.
And that's probably going to happen sooner than later.
So, yeah, that's probably going to happen end of this year, early next. So when that happens, it means if you built a rig using that processor today, your upgrade options would be really limited as far as just dropping in a new CPU.
That's going to be top of the line. There's not much else you can do.
The upgrade, you would have to also get a new motherboard, which is a bit more expensive and also a lot more hassle.
Yeah.
You know, installing a new processor is something that I think a fair amount of people could feasibly do. It's not all that hard to install a new processor. Once you get over just the factor of
that's what I would
installing something that's very expensive.
That's everything.
But
I would say
it's
about
really,
taking a computer
you got to take off the cooler, you unscrew a few things, you pop open a lid, and that's about it. Now with a motherboard, you have to unplug everything.
Yeah.
And you have to unplug all the power, you have to unscrew a whole bunch of screws, and that's really something that only enthusiasts have any interest in doing.
That's a Brad thing.
Yes, exactly. So, so that's definitely appealing, I think, for people who are building a system right now. You get in on that AMD hardware when it's nice and fresh, and you've got some upgrade passed down the line.
Something that you can use for years. Well, I think that's kind of where we're running out of time right now. But again, we've been talking about the AMD Threadripper CPU and the Vega RX GPUs and just the competition that they have with Nvidia and Intel. And we always like to hear comments. You can always email podcast@digitaltrends.com. We do this show Close to the Metal live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And we've got lots of back issues that you can check out, either subscribing on iTunes or you can see the videos on YouTube. And of course, at digitaltrends.com, where we've got articles about everything we've been talking about. In particular, if you want to learn more about the cryptocurrency issue and how it's affecting GPU prices, which is fascinating. We talked about that last week or the week before. You can check that all out in the back catalog of Close to the Metal. And any final thoughts? The reviews will be up as soon as we get them in-house.
And just real quick, the poll, we put up a poll asking if people were thinking about buying the new Vega RX GPUs. And we got 20% of people said, shut up and take my money.
Okay.
And 18% said green team forever, so they're on the Nvidia side.
Okay.
So that's a pretty even split there. About 45% were too early to tell.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are being sensible about it, which is actually more
That's
than I might have surprised. Yeah, I don't know. Like I thought more people might jump on the take my money bandwagon, and 17% are saying it will be a go-to cryptocurrency GPU. Yeah. So if you do add up that 20% and the 17%. So that is quite a, that's what 37%?
37%. Yeah. Math on the fly.
All
right.
So yeah, I think it's gonna be a pretty popular card, and I think a lot of people who are doing cryptocurrency mining are going to be looking at it. So if you are an AMD fan, the best thing you can do right now is hope that Bitcoin crashes really hard, because otherwise it's going to be getting hard to get a hold of one of these cards for sure.
All right. Well, there it is, the AMD. So all the information right there at digitaltrends.com. You can check it all out. And, of course, vote on the poll on Digital Trends' Twitter page. I think it might even be up on Facebook as well. Thank you, everybody, again, for tuning into the show. We made it through the show without Dan throwing a rock at us, but I think we're about to the limit of that. It's going to happen if we keep going any longer. So tune into the show live, like we said, every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, live on Facebook and YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week with another episode.